a great evening for us. And many of the mentors of our institute are here. We have Ramachandran, Manjulam, and it's a moment that we are sharing in many ways. Thank you very much for coming here. Without really taking too much time, I would like to welcome our guest of honor with a small planted pot. Yeah? Ritika? I request our President, Dr. Vimal, to deliver the welcome speech and also introduce our guest of honor, Dr. Ramachandran.
Yes, that's thank you very much. Thank you very much. This is actually a very nice feeling. It feels informal. It feels like a gathering of friends, and so I'm indeed very, very pleased to welcome Dr. Ramachandran here, and welcome all the other friends of CEPT University. I won't go through this whole thing. I'll very quickly go through it. I don't need to say much about CEPT here, because many of you have actually played a very important role in making CEPT. And Manjula Ben, Koshi Saab here, Taram has worked, Saxena Saab, and Panirvil Saab, everybody has worked. There are many teachers here. This is the end of the semester, where we are just, all the students are working towards their final juries and submissions. And I welcome all of you back once again at the end of 2 weeks, where we will have a student work exhibition, where all the work that the students are doing will be put up. And so that will be very nice to have all of you here. In the meantime, I'm very happy that we have this gathering, this book launch of Dr. Ramachandran, and it's my job to very quickly go through the experience and work that you have done. Dr. Ramachandran has held many posts with the central government of India. He's from 2006 to 10, Secretary, Ministry of Urban Development, and under his leadership, the JNNURM mission was launched, and he steered that. He was between 98 and 2003, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Shipping, and where also he had many important responsibilities. He was between 83 and 86, Private Secretary to Union Ministers of State in the Ministry of Industry, Finance, Commerce, Power, and Internal Security. So he has vast amount of experience with policy making at central government level. He has also worked in Uttar Pradesh and Uttarakhand. In Uttarakhand, he was between 2005 and 6 Chief Secretary to Government of Uttarakhand. A very high level and responsible position. And assignments were many. I'm not going to go through all of that. He's been Principal Secretary, Government of UP, Secretary, Higher Education, Government of UP, Commissioner, Meerut Division, Collector and District Magistrate, Bijnor, Government of UP, Collector and District Magistrate, Raebareli, and Additional District Magistrate, Uttarkashi, Government of UP between 75-76. So he has vast experience with governance all at variety of levels. Also international assignment. He spent 4 years between 86 and 92 with UNDP and as a representative of the Government of India. And there he headed programs in inter-trade sector, in industry, commerce, textile, etc. I don't want to once again go through the whole list. His education is BA with history, MA economics, MPhil economic planning, and Doctor of Philosophy in economics. And he has won many awards and huge amount of leadership experience. Many of you know him personally very well. Indeed, I'm very, very happy that you are here. I'm happy that all of you are here. And so I welcome you. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Shivananji, Vimal Patelji, esteemed senior colleague Sri C.K. Koshi, my illustrious batchmate, Ms. Manjula Subramanian. It's a great honor to be with the batchmate. And during this journey, when my book was being discussed in different cities, I was always looking forward to opportunities of meeting some batchmate. And in Chandigarh, it was our Chima. Chima, who is rarely seen. That's right. That's right. So it was an interesting couple of months since this got launched. Thank you very much for this platform. And Shivananji, whatever request I make to him, he immediately takes note of that. And I'm grateful. I can see some of my esteemed colleagues who have taken time off to come and join. And you may not be colleagues, but the future of tomorrow sitting here. And that's what excites me when I go to different places. I've been to some 10, 11 cities so far discussing this book, because Rupa said release is not enough. You have to go to places and talk about the book. So I've had the opportunity of talking about this at different places. So I do not intend to summarize the book or go into the details given in this. Either it may generate some interest for you to go through it, what does it say. And for those who are in the service or who have been in the service, they'll think that, oh, he has written what we all have done during our service also. So what is different? The point is to find out what is different in this. And that's one of the points I was trying to make. But as I mentioned during these discussions in different places, I'll start by saying I've referred to these two ministers who gave me a lot of encouragement. One was Mr. Jayapal Reddy when he was the minister. He said bureaucrats should write. I mean, it was very typical coming from a statesman like him, encouraging bureaucrats to write because many people don't want things written or they think that bureaucrats cannot write that well. So he always used to say bureaucrats should write, and he had come for a couple of my book releases also. Then Mr. Venkaiah Naidu, who as Urban Development Minister was very clear-cut when he said books should lead to discussions. And I think that was important. It's not that everyone will write so beautifully or that will be a Nobel Prize winning performance also, but the books should lead to discussions. That's one key statement he made, which also sort of encouraged me to go ahead with this writing. So I'll just pick up some of the points which came up during this discussions. In one of the discussions, looking at the title, one of my colleagues said, "You are not a maverick." And there is another very senior colleague who said, "Ramachandran, you are a maverick. I thought I was the only maverick, but you are saying you are also a maverick." So it depends on how you look at the meaning of the word and how you see the person. To some people, it is maverick means you have done things totally different against law and things like that. But maverick also means that you have done things different from what people normally would do. And that's what I thought. People ask me, why did you go for this title? I said I had limitations because when we write, we don't have much of a freedom to choose the title because they all have copyrights. So the traditional titles which one would like to have, they are all taken and gone. So you have to think of something different, and the publisher makes it a point to say that it has to appeal to people. So it has to have something. So that's how this title came about. So that's about the maverick part, and the colleague said that the way you have worked, you have generally gone according to rules and traditions and all that. So where is the maverick part in it? But my point is, when you try to do things differently, that also is of relevance. The other point was truth speaking to power. I have made a reference to that in the book. So one of the interviewers asked me, in your case, did truth speak to power or did power speak to truth? Now it was a difficult question to answer because when someone asks, you cannot answer in one single sentence. This is how it was. But again, the message one is trying to send out is ideally it should be a situation where truth speaks to power. But there are very many occasions in our service and career where we find it difficult, and in many cases, power speaks to truth. So it's a very critical question, and it is a statement made by Mr. M. Butch. So that's where it started from, and he wrote to the Prime Minister at that time, illustrating this and saying that this is how it should be. He also talked about the changes which should come about as far as the system is concerned. The collectors should be held responsible, they should have tenure and things like that. In one of the discussions, I was asked a very point-blank question, do you think today's youngsters should join the service? Again, a difficult question to answer. There are lots of youngsters sitting here. I don't know whether they want to leave this profession and move on to civil service, but some may be thinking in those terms, so I shouldn't discourage them, or I don't know whether I should encourage them. My point was, if you have a service motive, then you should opt for a service like this. But if you are after money, then probably you should go to other professions and other areas. That's very, very, very clear. So one has to make a choice. You can't come into the service and say that I'll take advantage of the service and I would like to make enough money. That's an unfortunate reality today, and most distressing as far as the service is concerned. So if you want to do something different, there is an opportunity available in this service, even today, whatever people may talk about it. But it is possible. But then don't enter into an area where one should look at the creature comforts and something bigger than that, and one should go to areas which are not desirable, because public service is something where one has to have a certain amount of discipline. In one of the universities, I was asked, why has urban planning failed in India? Now, again a very difficult question. I always, Vimalji would have heard me, Shivanji would have heard me. I've narrated this any number of times. The capital city of India, 30% is unauthorized colonies, 30% is slums. It's only the remaining 30% plus also who adhere to the regulations and requirements of a city. So that's how we start from the national capital. So about to talk of other cities and other towns in India. It's a fact, and I think youngsters keep looking at it, keep thinking about it. That what is it that you are all talking about? What is it that you are preaching? That we should go by all these regulations and development control norms and this and that and all that. And I have an illustrious colleague here who always tries to push the point that one should go by these if you have to have certain sanity in cities. I don't know, Vimalji, from your experience, whether you would still say that it is possible. One probably has to look at the way we do things and what changes are required in tune with today's problems and requirements. I often talk about this point. People come to cities in search of employment. I always refer to a guard, a chowkidar or a guard who may be earning 5,000 rupees a month. Where does he get an accommodation in a city like Delhi? We have not provided for that. And that's a fundamental drawback as far as our city planning system is concerned. And this will continue to happen. Then I look at the new examples, the other extreme examples of Naya Raipur and Amravati. So both places, they say we have kept enough buffer so that in future when situations like this come up, there is place for them. I am not very sure because even if a house is to be made available, I wonder how many of them would be able to pay for that and get even a small dwelling unit. Chandigarh, I think, is a classic example. I don't know whether I am entering controversial areas, but Chandigarh's periphery is totally spoiled. It could be more because of involvement of other states, but still, we took pride in having a city like that. But ultimately now what has happened is we are going to have to deal with issues of slums just because we have not been able to provide houses. So urban planning has its complexities. I mean, one can answer it both ways. Have we succeeded? Have we failed? I think we have tried to bring in some sort of semblance to the extent possible, but there is a lot which desires to be done. At the Delhi discussions, I had two ex-cabinet secretaries, Mr. T.S. Subramanian, who unfortunately is no more. He very vehemently talked about a code of conduct for politicians. I think it's something worth debating, and he even suggested to Amitabh Kant, who was sitting there, Niti Aayog should probably take up and bring out a paper whether politicians should have a code of conduct. Now the point is, civil servants want to work, many of them want to work according to certain system requirements and what is expected of them. Are they allowed to do that or not? Then what does one do? So I think, as I said in the beginning, books should generate discussions. Though this should also lead to a discussion about, is it time to think about some sort of a code of conduct for the politician also? Thus far and no further. You confine yourselves to policy making, you entrust implementation to the civil service, but with accountability. I would stick to that. There has to be accountability in the civil service, a tenure system, accountability, and then I think civil servants will be able to perform much, much better than what they are doing today, and it's possible. Then the classic question which keeps coming up, is the civil service still the steel frame of the country? Now, one could look at it from different points of view. It must have got rusted, but we need a frame. I said whether it is steel or aluminum, but we need to have a frame because that keeps the country going, and that's important. So it could again be debated as to whether it's relevant in the way it was formed in the country and things like that. So there, I would just like to refer to a couple of sentences which the Vice President spoke when releasing the book. It has also been sometimes viewed as a negative, in a negative light, that's about civil service, as very rigid and unbending. That's what he said. Sometimes also described as a steel frame that has got rusted because of inefficiencies and corruption. I think both words are significant. While there are some aberrations and some exceptions, I must say that the higher civil service has been one of the greatest contributors to nation building. They have led from the front. So coming from the political leaders who probably have a much better understanding of what it is like, things like this become important and they sort of encourage people. These are some of the select points which I thought I should refer to here. I don't want to refer to the book or what it means. I have narrated that in the preface. I think it will be of value for those who want to enter the civil service, those who are in the civil service, if they want to care to listen to some of these points, sharing of experiences. Each one has a certain type of experience in different circumstances. I worked in those two states of UP and Uttarakhand. Those who have worked in other states would have different types of experiences, but it's a fact that everyone does not write. So you have access to what is written and what is available. And also to the general public, I said, because very many think that it's a very comfortable place. Once you are in, then you are very comfortable. But then the challenges one has to face, the problems one has to face, the tensions one has to face. I've narrated some of them, and it's all there. So how to handle situations, how to handle difficult situations. When there is a success, I think there are very many people who are with you. But then there could be difficult situations, and quite often in the hierarchy, there are places where you are left alone, and you have to fend for yourself, or you have to look for solutions at your own level. So how does one handle situations like that? I'll conclude this part by saying, when I met the finance minister, I had narrated my experiences with working with some politicians, some top level, some state level. He asked me, who is the worst politician you have worked with? I didn't have an answer to that, because maybe I was lucky I didn't have to deal with a politician who was absolutely difficult, who was my boss, or with whom I had continuous dealings. I have narrated some instances where there have been some one or two unsatisfactory incidents, disappointing incidents, but apart from that, I couldn't think of someone who was worst. One could be categorized as worst. I don't know whether you would term it a diplomatic reply, but from the depth of my heart, I would say that was my experience. Maybe I was singularly lucky in that I didn't have to handle a difficult person like that. So it's all there in this. Thank you, Shivananji. Those who would be interested in reading this probably will get a little bit more ideas about the civil service, the system, what is that we can do. I've also posed a question from my point of view, whether I have been able to make a difference. Because I believe each person, each officer should be making a difference as far as the system is concerned. One can be a routine bureaucrat, one can keep doing things, get normal postings and complete one's whatever number of years. But in that also, whether one has been able to make some difference, some changes, and I have referred to some of those. Of course, it will be in the given circumstances. Those who go to extremes sometimes have to face serious problems, but there are very many changes which can still be brought about even within the given limitations of the situation. So thank you very much. That's all I would like to mention about the book.
Sir, thank you very much, and I must also congratulate you. The book has evinced a lot of interest. I was trying to get some copies beforehand, and all that I could catch hold of were 5 copies. No books available in, all out of stock in Baroda, out of stock in Surat, and all the way to Pune. Pune, there were only 2 copies. They have not reached here as yet. Yeah? Therefore, I think that's one interesting part of it. I think book has immense lot of interest. I had personally requested our senior colleagues to give their reflection on the book. Also, I could not share the book beforehand. I would request them to say a few words, and then question answers would open up.
Mr. Ramachandran, Manjula, Bimal, Ravi, Anirvel, Tara, all good friends, as Bimal said. Feels like family. I have unfortunately not read the book, so no comments on the book. I will restrict myself to 2 very quick comments. The first is that the act of writing a book involves an enormous amount of mental discipline. And I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate Dr. Ramachandran for having exercised that discipline, not once, but 9 times. I believe he is the author of 9 books. And my admiration for him has grown, because anybody who can sit down and exercise that discipline is a person of very strong will. There are stories about J.K. Rowling's. I have never read a Harry Potter book, but if you have a glimpse of her biography and the trials and tribulations that she went through, she is great not because she has just written children's books which are enormously popular, but consistently, book after book after book, she has exercised a certain consistency of style which has caught the imagination of the young, and that is very difficult. So, post-retirement, that Dr. Ramachandran is active, intellectually active. He is chairing several committees with the Government of India and extremely sensitive to the ebb and flow of the tide in public administration and in governance. My full congratulations to him. The second point and my last point is he mentioned about truth and power. And as he was talking about truth and power, the first thing that hit me was the now very famous or rather infamous comment that there is a president who is not tethered to power. This is Covey who spoke about Trump. His very explosive book is now out. And he speaks of this fatal flaw in a great man, that if you are not tethered to the truth, then you have actually blown it. You are no longer fit for that office. People like Ramachandran, apart from power and truth, the single silver thread that runs through their career is that he is a man of unblemished record, of unblemished integrity, and a person who has always been tethered to the truth. Thank you for coming here and sharing your book with us, and all the very best.
I didn't really imagine that I would have to speak. I would only reflect on one point that you made, sir. Steel frame or some kind of a frame. I think the expectations from the service have changed long ways from the time it was conceived during the British times. The British people wanted a steel frame basically to run their colony because they did not have their own people. So they trained a certain class of people to learn English and to rule over all those who did not know English. And that was a divide, which was unfortunately, I would treat it as unfortunate in the sense we were born into that kind of a role and perhaps took pride over it. For a long time that we were the steel frame for the colonial power that was there. Now, over a period of time, we have become principal agency for development. After the policy is given to us, the challenge is with us, and therefore there is a different definition that we need to evolve for the role that this service has to play. There is absolutely no doubt in my mind that a frame is required. Steel, perhaps because the requirements of the developmental role are calling for some kind of manifestations, is becoming an alloy which needs to be defined perhaps better. But one thing I can say is that if one wants to be the truth, it is not impossible. It is possible to stay with the truth and speak to the power. Only thing is one may perhaps give up on agendas of more colorful nature. So it's possible, and I see that the service survives not only because it is a frame which is required, but also because there are a very large number of officers who are really following the truth and are able to develop a manifestation of the steel that is required for carrying on with the task that this country has bestowed upon them. And the fact that 70 years down the line we are a unified country perhaps owes a good deal to the frame that has been created under the service. Thank you, sir. It was such a pleasure to have you at here. And I sincerely appreciate that you've devoted time for writing on a subject like this. Thank you.
Good evening to everybody. On behalf of CEPT, in any case I was part of it, I welcome Dr. Ramachandran. When the all officers were talking about the steel frame, one point Dr. Ramachandran addressed to the youngsters, underlying whether you would like to join such kind of service. He answered to that, if you have service as a motto, then yes, you are welcome. It has a great meaning. I was in the service. After retirement, I preferred to be an entrepreneur. Sir, it gives totally different dimension. I do go and wait outside of the office. My own colleagues, the junior officers, it's totally a different experience. Sir, many times I used to laugh at myself. Recently I went and happened to be in an office, in a meeting. I started questioning myself, was I like this? So, the truth and power never go together. On the time as a context, the time which is going marketing, which is post-truth era, where marketing is the highest one. You just sell Colgate, whatever it has. Just do that. So, recently someone has published, every voter is intellectually calibrated by the education system or by the environment, qualified to be an intellectual voter. So, today's every democracy, as I was mentioning about the developed country, now Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel had a kind of a vision to create this service. This should put a fabric all over the country. India as a United Nations kind of thing. But the things, the speed at which right now we are discussing about truth and power, now we all enjoy. What are we leaving to the youngsters? It's a real challenge and question. Perhaps Dr. Ramachandran's book must be answering very deceptively or posing a challenge. But either it's a challenge or it's a question, we have to solve it. So I take the opportunity to say thanks to him to open up such a book and giving us an opportunity to be with you. Sir, thanks for coming over here. We wish you come here often with one more book very soon, and we'll have a little more time. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Bimal, and thank you, Sivanand.
Thank you, Master. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. I am really honored to be here when you're releasing a book of Ramachandran, sir. I don't want to talk about the book or the service. Maybe I'll talk about service later because I don't know. But I would only cherish those moments when, as Deputy Municipal Commissioner, as a little thing, I used to go and sit in the JNURM meeting. And I would start the presentation and he would say, 500 crores sanctioned. So, I mean, the confidence he had never seen us, and I'm sure he would have done his due diligence before he said that. But I was very proud to, every time I would come out of the meeting and say, look, I got 500 crores sanctioned. And I mean, I used to be the regular visitor to those meetings and I still cherish those times. Actually, I think the way we look at service, I totally agree that the frame with which we are working is not suited to the real India at all. That has to change very, very drastically. We have to put ourselves in the boots of the person who's sitting in front of us before we take a decision. And number two, many a times we make a mistake in the name of honesty. Having said that, being honest is important, but being understanding, because our understanding of honesty becomes very limited to what we think or what we cultured. Actually, an honest perception of a person sitting in front of us maybe a little different. If we really understand the compulsions he comes with, then we may strike a balance. I think somewhere we are losing that perspective. As Sir said, Panirval Sir said, I mean, did I behave like this? Yes, this happens with all of us. Because a person, I mean, typically I'll explain to you the situation. In Ayuda, I used to work. So when I joined here as collector Ahmedabad, I was 7 years old in service. So some people came and advised me that really good, I mean, really well wishers. They said, Ben, in Gujarat, they call you Ben. And Ben, you have come here. And apparently they must have had some ideas for us. And somebody, I won't take the name, he said, your son has to become a MBBS. How will you fend for him? It costs a lot. If you remain like this, what will happen? So I liked the comment. I took it and I laughed it off and gave him a tea and I didn't react much. After 20 years, again people came back to me and said, we thought you will change in 10 years. You haven't changed. I said, when I change, it will be very drastic. Don't worry. So what I mean to say is, one is people watch you very closely. They understand the officers much better than we understand them. That's one thing. Second thing is, I think what is a business opportunity for somebody is a moral question for us. So there are two different parlance when we are dealing with it. And the third thing which happens is, I can tell you with confidence after dealing with private sector, or for that matter, there are very few in the private sector who lose their money. So we have to be careful that we don't let government lose money for them. At the same time, if he is benefiting when our laws are, actually there is no concept of social benefits and social costs in our service, which has to come in. When we take a decision, it's not whether it is government which is benefiting or not. If I make a policy which allows me to take a decision in the interest of the society where 10 or 100 persons get employment, that is more important than to prove my honesty that, this rule is very important. After all, rules are for people, but I think it's very difficult to change rules. I've worked, luckily till now, I've been working in organizations where I can take decisions and change policies as it would require, but it doesn't happen so easily in government. I mean, I would say still Gujarat government is a open government, barring a few things of faults we have, because still the bureaucrats are much better, sir. Sir, definitely you are much better, and you have done a much better job in dealing with private sector also, because we hear about your practical approach to solve people's problems. So, but I can't imagine. To conclude, I'll only say UP Industries Secretary was here, Mr. Sinha, the present Secretary, Alok Sinha Saab. So we were just telling that what is GIDC, and they were. So I told industrialists, come to us. He sits across the table. He says, this is what the project I have. I say, okay, I'll give you land, 50 hectares, 10 hectares, 5 hectares. Oh, how can you do that? I said, yeah, we can do it. So I think Gujarat provides that opportunity to be bold for the bureaucrats. At the same time, we also have some downsides. I think, seniors have spoken, I've yet to cross that bar where I can call myself a senior. But I think we need a lot of empathy and understanding of the situation before we implement our rules and so tightly that just because we are correct or we should be correct or the position gives us wisdom, that attitude we should also shirk a little bit to go forward. That's all I think I should be doing. I have not done it as adequately as I would like to. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Sir? Do you have Dinesh? Us?
No, she is doing the concluding, so she'll sum up everything and she'll have the final word. There are 2 points I thought I should refer to. One, the JNNURM presentations from Gujarat. I must say it's no flattery. Among the states, Gujarat used to be the state which used to come well prepared for presentations. And implementation also was top class. I had a little bit of a problem because at that time the political scheme of things in Delhi was different. it was different here. But coming from the south, you would appreciate, we look at things objectively straight away. What is it? We don't look at the color of it. I mean, I'm not saying when I say we, others do, but certain parts have certain characteristics. We are much more forthright and blunt in stating that, I think. So it was a fact that among the states which came with presentations, and I had difficulty with states which won't move forward. Projects have been approved, they haven't taken even the first steps, and they'll come with more projects. So how do we take that up for consideration? So that was remarkable. And Tara, I remember also Vijay Anatkat used to be one of your team members. So there were people like that who would come prepared, and the presentations, it was a treat to watch. And during opportunities, I used to say, Western India is different. I mean, pardon my saying, in North India, it's an entirely different approach. It'll take some more time for North India to reach certain levels. So that was a fact. So where there is, one thought that after reaching that stage, when a state is well prepared, that is a state which gets more approvals and more projects faster, of course, remaining within the limitation of whatever was the allocation. And it was always a delight listening to the officers who came from here, made presentation, and the responses one used to get. You make a point, you seek some clarification, the response is quick. That also makes a big difference. The second point I want to make is, I think it was in Bangalore probably when discussions took place, one question was raised, should senior officers who have more experience be put in charge of implementation? Because in our scheme of things, the more senior we become policy makers and sit in the glass house of secretariat or whatever it is. Shouldn't senior officers who have the inclination to implement well, shouldn't they be put in charge of implementation? Also, shouldn't officers who go to the district should be more senior? This is one thought which came up. So among the public also, there are streams of thought like this. And I suppose wherever it is possible, the system should think about these. I come across various people, some of the exercises which we are doing as part of a committee. There are people who may not be the really secretariat type after 30 years of service, but given charge of a big program or a project or an entity, they may do wonderfully well. But again, in the scheme of things, in the hierarchy, it's not great to be a managing director when you're put in 30 years of service. You can only be a chairman, just preside over board meetings, that's it. So there are these thinking also which keep happening in the public.
Any questions from the youngster? Any of you? Sure. Last name is
Sir, it's a very. I congratulate Tara for very forthright statements, and I was quite impressed by what she said. What I have come across most of the times, that when bureaucrats, and there's no reflection on you or in your book because I've not read it, they are when they're in office, their views and attitude towards government, and once they are, then their outburst and the anti-government statements and actions. But how do you reconcile with this kind of contradiction? Can't they be forthright during their careers? And there have been some who have paid very heavy costs. But why? There are very, very few. Can't be from a bureaucracy to be forthright because they are very important part of entire system. And if they put their foot down, it won't be easy for elected representatives also to violate those norms, which normally they do. But unfortunately, it doesn't happen. So my question is, why there is this kind of contradiction or dualism?
And if there are no more questions,
You put the box so that I take the brunt. Yeah, I think the popular perception is that while you are in service, you are either a coward or you are bound by rules and therefore you don't speak out. Well, that is a binary which is oversimplification. It is a fact, and I accept the fact, that many autobiographies of civil servants harp on the note that things were great till the day they retired and things have become terrible after they retired. That impression is also true. But to try to simplify a complex issue, the point is that while you are in service, you are part of a system. The British called it the establishment. And there are rules and regulations regarding your conduct and your ability to speak out and criticize, quote unquote, the system. You could well argue that this is a free country and you are supposed to express your views, but there are disciplinary constraints, there are laws, regulations, which prevent you from going against the so-called, quote unquote, establishment. Now, if you look at it, this isn't very strange, because I think such rules and regulations do exist in every organization. And no organization worth its salt can really exist without certain rules which bind its members to a certain code of conduct. That is true. But having said that, yes, it is a fact that while we are in service, we are constrained by numerous forces which prevent us from speaking out against things which we think are patently unfair. The second point, and my second point is, again, perceptions differ. That when you are part of a policy-making mechanism and you contribute peripherally to the evolution of a policy, you are part of a system and you know the problems which impinge upon that policy, and what you as the outsider, the common man, the Aam Aadmi, perceives to be a major flaw need not necessarily be a flaw when you are looking at it from within the system. So this is the fact of the matter, that when you are part of a policy making, there are always pros and cons. And when you get out of the system and you are not aware of the various permutations, combinations, opinions which led to that policy, it's very easy then to criticize that policy.
Just have a somewhat similar kind of a question. I just wanted to know how much space the bureaucrats have while they're at different stages of the training, etc., to speak up and talk about different ways of having bureaucratic system, etc. And what kind of reactions or responses do you get? Like, what I'm basically, I'm trained as an economist, and I'm trained to ask questions. So I'm just asking you how much space people have in that setup to ask questions, even within your system. I know it's not beyond, outside that, but within that.
It's a very important issue, and I think in every policy making process, there is a built-in scope and space for dissent. Typically, when a policy is evolved and people contribute to that policy, every civil servant is sworn under oath to give his advice without fear or favor. He is supposed to contribute to the file, the so-called red tape file in which he is asked to express his views. And that is the time when you can take a different view to the so-called accepted policy. And you are supposed to record your views. So dissent is very much part of the process of policy making. It is also true, unfortunately, and again I may be falling into the same trap that he mentioned, that the scope and space for dissent is shrinking. It was very common for us during the time when I was there, again falling into the same trap, that we could oppose a decision on file and put in writing a contrary view. But once the scheme of devolution of power comes into play and the evolution of policy ultimately takes a particular turn and you have a final authority, duly authorized by law, taking a view, then you are supposed to actually accept it and shut up. That is the discipline of the system. But to answer your question, there is very much scope for dissent in policy making.
And before you take on, can I just add a few words? You know, when I taught last semester a course in which what essentially I did was talk through the 16 weeks of different projects that I have been involved in. And so there was an opportunity to talk with students about work that I've actually done. And this was an urban planning one. It was not about architecture. It was primarily work in government. Many times the questions that would come would be about the system and how dysfunctional it is. Government doesn't function. This is the problem. That is the problem. And I would think back to the first time when I started interacting with the Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation, which was unfortunately too far back. But at that time, the municipal corporation, I mean, the first time, my first interaction was a time when there was a proposal being discussed to sell off a garden to pay salaries. Practically, there was no money in the municipal corporation. Oh, and I remember a time even before that when I went to the municipal corporation, when I was still a student. At that time, the Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation was completely defunct, lawless in some ways. Mayor sitting there discussing, issues that you simply cannot you discuss in that place. And over a period of time, despite all the sort of back and forth, you think it's one step forward, two step backwards. It's not. It's more often two step forward, one step backwards. And I keep seeing the sort of changes that have happened. Today, the budget is 7,000 crores. The sterling projects, the capacity of the municipal corporation that did not even know how to have a single computer now does amazing amount of work. When I look back, I think I've been blessed in some sense because I've been able to see change and change for so much change for the better over a period of 25, 30 years that I worked with. Now, I wouldn't say that, this change has come about because lots of different people have contributed to it. But definitely, I would like to say, that the leadership, the administrative leadership that has gone through the municipal corporation at the highest level, all the various commissioners, and I've worked with, I think, 13 or 14, and at the state level, various people, that has been exemplary and played, every once in a while there have been times when I've been hugely frustrated, but when I look back and I think of the enormous transformation and development that I've seen, I feel that's fantastic. We have to think about it, we have to talk about it, and we don't have to feel that this whole system is so dismal. Just look back at where we were just 25 years ago and look at where we are right now, and you will see things are happening. Just have to have a little bit of patience and a little longer term view. And many of the people that have been trained in Mussoorie have been part of that. We're not the only people, but definitely in positions of leadership who have brought about tremendous, important, game-changing type of changes into the system. So I just wanted to say that, and I didn't want that left unsaid when you talk about all the dismal things that go on in the system. Thank you.
Would you like to add to it? Yep. Now, Manjula Meron to conclude the discussions and this event with a few words.
Whatever, I don't mind. Dr. Ramachandran, Mr. Koshi, incidentally, he's been my collector. I used to be the assistant collector trotting around in Bharuch, and Bimal Bhai, Shivanand Swamiji, Panirve. Go through similar kind of posts, but let me tell you, each person's approach to a post is extremely different. The ecosystems could have been very different, and the way they approached it and what they got out of it has been very different. You could run up into very good politicians also. I think we were very lucky in the early days to see good politicians. I mean, people who did not want to exploit the situation, but gave us proper advice. I think that was wonderful, because that gave us an opportunity to really grow, to understand what people want. And many of them have taken me to the district, and shown me their fields and everything. So that made me stand on the ground. But getting back to what Dr. Ramachandran has done, he has also been one of those who has taken life in its stride. He has not sought comfortable postings. He's gone wherever he has been told to go and asked to go. I think there's a degree of pleasure, unalloyed pleasure. Initially one does feel, sometimes that, okay, perhaps others do say, oh, this is not terribly nice. But one always learns in the process. Every posting has been a place where one has learned. And I think he has grown in that, grown to such an extent that he's gone to various places. And his ideas are extremely, extremely clear, and he's done a lot of reading and put in a lot of inputs. As he's also pointed out, everybody can make some differences. Now again, it depends upon the system. Without sounding cynical, let me tell you, there have been times when one has been totally overruled. You put up something which is, there are some things which still rankle me, that if that had been done, things would have been better. But it was totally overruled. Now you can't talk about it because your lips are sealed. But there are other things where I probably got much more than I thought I would have done. So there are some things about which one does have a few regrets, but some have worked out better. In fact, even the acclaims have come more for things which one worked a little less on than those on which one has worked quite a bit on and slogged and slogged and slogged. So each one can do things, and if you have the right ecosystem, Tara said you can even modify rules. When she mentioned about going to Dr. Ramachandran and giving the presentation, coming back with 500 crores, I remember that as a district development officer in Jamnagar, I was tackling this thing of epidemics of rats, and the rodents were eating all the wheat stalks, biting them from below. So our agriculture officer told us the only way to get is that rodent medicine, and you put that into the fields and do that. So I came all the way to Gandhinagar, and there was an elderly officer, Mr. M.G. Shah, is just passed away. He was our finance secretary. Now, I didn't have a clue, but I went to his, they told me you go to the PS. So I went to the PS and I told him I've come from Jamnagar. I believe this file is with him now. Anybody would have thrown me out saying, what are you doing about all these things? But he said he's just coming in about 5 minutes. And then I went to him and I told him, sir, there's a file for about 70,000. Those days it was only 70,000. 70,000 lying with you, but if we can take it, then we'll get the medicines and we'll put it into the fields and the rodents will die. He just gave me one look, signed it and told his PS that you take it away. So these were the kinds of people who sometimes really encouraged us. They didn't know us at all. And there are people still who do that, maybe a few and far between, because they're also scared that this decision of theirs may be challenged and all. One good thing in our times was if people, as they used to tell us, that your CR and the character record is written by the people earlier than by all your people, and all your officers, and they write it very well, and they know everything about a person, everything. So if generally they have a kind of a trust factor, then I think they don't sort of let down. Of late, one does find some sleazy things happening sometimes, but I suppose that is part of the whole game. The whole world is turning into that kind of a system. But it is possible to still steer a little clear of as many things as possible and try and tell people. You may not always succeed. Let me be very, very honest. You just may not always succeed. And one good thing is that, you know, our service is like a kaleidoscope. You are posted in one place and then suddenly it shifts and you go to another place. For example, I had in my urban development, I had a gentleman from Jamnagar who was only fond of, selling out TP lands and all. That was his primary interest. My interest was very different. And he didn't like me at all. So he constantly was trying to get me out. And I was, in fact, after 2 years, I was traveling around with my voluntary retirement and my resignation over there because I was so fed up with this man. But then I told myself, I'm in the right and he's in the wrong. Why should I resign? So I held on for some more time. And then lo and behold, elections took place and he got totally knocked out. Of course, I also moved out from urban development, which I felt very sad about because nobody asked us where do you want to go. Most of the time, they just put you there. So I didn't really think that I would move out. I was quite enjoying my stint in urban development, although I was more like one of those novice cricketers who would hit all around the field, and whenever I had a problem, I would come down to CEPT. So that's how I know all of them very well and have great big discussions on how to proceed because there were so many areas which were so grey and our people, our staff was totally clueless actually. So it was a good opportunity to come here, discuss with them and how to move forward. And they've really helped us in so many of the things. And we were quite happy to give them the assignment because there was no audit objection or anything when you give it to an institution. So I think that part was extremely wonderful. But he's really taken a lot of interest and he's still very dedicated. I've been working with him on this committee. Very, very dedicated and serious and hardworking. But it takes a lot to go through all this and to be able to be upright and do things. We've also incidentally had lots of good officers who have really, whom we've tried to emulate also. We often sometimes wonder whether we did them the right, if it was right to emulate them or not to emulate them. But I think this is part of the story. As he said, see, those of you who are passionate about public service, I think there is still scope for public service. I see some youngsters, sometimes really so passionate. I don't think I was that passionate as I see them. So if they have that kind of passion, it should be possible. But as he said, you can't make money, nor can you be successful, nor will you be a page 3 person, or will you be very famous. Most often you have to lie low. You don't sort of brandish your image around most of the time or talk too much. So if you're not looking for those kinds of things, you're just looking for, and it gives you immense satisfaction to see a poor person come and get something done and go back satisfied. And many of them are still so simple. They will just say, you heard us? I said, I may not be able to help you, but you heard us. That's all we want, and then they go back. I think both of them raised this question of how our attitude has been. I do believe that there is a great, there's an interlinking factor which we also don't come to know. For example, when you're in the chair and you're talking, your PS is bigger than you, actually. And he will say, oh, she doesn't have time for this, or he won't have time. Actually, you probably would have time and would make the time also. But these people tend to get bigger than, their size. And it's not often. Sometimes you are able to cut them down, like you keep a watch. Or you say, you can give me the list of people who wanted to call up and then counter check and do like that. But often it's not, because it may be being done, without one's knowing, and one comes to know long afterwards that this has actually been happening, and they are doing that. But that was told to me, one of my officers also told me that if you have to be the collector of a district, you must know what everybody is having for breakfast. I mean, your network, intelligence network must be that good. It's not always possible to do that. But clearly you also have to keep your antenna open. And one thing an old man told me when I joined the service, he said, read every postcard which comes to you, even if it's half a page, you read it. So I did make a point to read most. At least I would club them together, and sometimes when I got time, it would be a huge bundle which I would, and all in, in Gujarati, but it gave volumes of information. And sometimes my staff have said, oh, how did she come to know about this? And tried to find out whether any of the other people went and told me, and then, they could have told them to keep quiet. But these are instances which have to be done. In fact, I think Kautilya also says that a king has to go in disguise and find out what is happening amongst the subjects. In a sense, lot of people, the earlier generation also used to go in, in other things, find out what is happening, move around. We don't have that much time, but I think if we did that, we would really have better feedback as to what exactly is happening. Sometimes what we may be implementing may be totally foolish. So it is always useful to get the feedback. I must say that it must have, he's still writing 9 books, my God, that's quite a bit. And writing out is not a joke. Writing out even a PhD thesis was quite a bit. So I think this must be this thing. But let me wish you all the best. And I think I'm really glad that you have awakened a great interest and sort of raised a lot of issues which I'm sure a lot of people would like to think of. And I think for the youngsters, there could be a good this thing. It's not that bad. But yes, you have to I sometimes wonder, whether this is just a last minute passing thought. I sometimes thought that we needed to educate our, some of our politicians also. Which we never get down to doing. But, teach them how to address things, teach them how to. Some were willing to listen, some would not listen. You see, if you're a newcomer, then you're not going to listen. If somebody says you should read all this and you should do that. And there are others who stand it on the head. You teach them all that and they will use it against you. So there are those kinds of people also. So there are all kinds of things because it's a world of people with a lot of different interests and stakes also. Their stakes are definitely of a different variety. But we need to move in that direction because we really have a lot to do. Thank you so much, and wish you all the best.
Thank you, ma'am. I'd like to thank Ramachandran sir for this opportunity. Sir, we remember all those JNURM meetings, COE coming into existence, and all that, what subsequently the support and guidance we have been receiving you. And also, for this particular event, give us this opportunity to bring all our mentors, guides in many, many ways. Now, we remember all their post-earthquake, the kind of work which we've associated with Madam Hajira, and then I integrated public transport with Saxena Saab, and then drafting of University Act with Panirvel Saab, the BRTS, and so much more that this university has gained from you and our senior friends and colleagues here. I'd like to thank all of you for this, and also thank my colleagues and our students, for being part of this event, and thank you very much.